thought I would do a bit of a check-in update. It is after Christmas and we've just had a really wonderful time. It has been very hot, so I apologize for a bit of the buzzing in the background. It is the aircon and the fan, because otherwise we would be melting. Anyway, I actually got a question from a friend that I've known for a long time that I used to work with in America, and I just thought I'd kind of answer that, as well as for anyone who's new, kind of go over a little bit of our infertility journey and why we are up to where we're at now. So December, it's after Christmas, before New Year. So right now, our infertility journey has gone on for 15 years. So during that time, it kind of came about because we got married when I was 21. I'd been babysitting really since the age of 10 and looking after my siblings earlier than that. But really, I've been in childcare since I was 17. And so when we kind of officially, unofficially started trying, I was very clear I wanted to be a young mum. I wanted to have my first by 25, be done by 30. Yeah, and my husband, like, he's 7.5 years older than me, so we always knew that we wanted to be younger parents, and there was already an age gap, and his dad passed away when he was 5, and he, you know, had, I think, just turned 50, and so he passed away from brain and lung cancer. And so we knew for Chad as well that he didn't want to be an older or sick dad, and so there's many reasons why we wanted to start a family young. So we were married for about just over a year, and in my perfect plan I was going to have 2 years of marriage so that we know each other well enough before establishing a family. And I only say that with sarcasm because obviously how long it's been, and after 2 years, can you really know everything about your husband? That's part of the journey along the way. Anyway, so the plan was 2 years, then start trying, except for within a couple of months, actually probably even before I got married, I started having issues with the pill. I started bleeding through cycles. I started, it wasn't good, and my hormone levels were a mess. So after the year of us being married, so October was the year, December I had tried the injections, Depo-Vira, and the first 3 months worked really well. It helped me out. The second was awful, and it was a real problem. And so I, in consultation with the doctor, came off of that, and so it was supposed to come out of my system in December. So December of the year after we got married, we started trying. And so we started having I started having issues with my cycle. It was like 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And at the time, mind you, this is 15 years ago, here in Australia, I was asked if I had PCOS, and that was a no, because at that time I hadn't had major weight gain, I didn't have hair, I didn't have some of the classic symptoms. And so that was kind of ruled out, and just said, oh, actually Depo-Vira might stay in your system for a year. And then the year came round and they're like, oh, it might stay in your system up to 2 years. So long story short, we spent a couple years trying to get that worked out, and every other month I thought I was pregnant. Like, it was a lot because my cycle was all over the show. And so we then moved to America in that time. So we'd been married just over 2 years when we moved, and then I had to wait 7 months for my green card. So Chad had already moved over to the US, getting everything set up financially for us, getting us a rental, all that kind of fun stuff, while I was waiting for my green card details. So we were separated for just over 7 months. And when I got there, both Chad and I had lost weight. We'd really been working on us individually, came together. And after around 6 months of trying, we had a chemical pregnancy. So that is pretty much where your hormones spike, it reads as pregnant, the conception part may have happened, and then within 24 hours, the line went away. And my understanding is that even though we had a surge in that HGC levels, the embryo did not attach, and so therefore we lost and had a cycle. So between that and 7 years later was our next early natural miscarriage. We had pretty much been to 5 doctors, different infertility doctors, and of course in America the moment you mention infertility, insurance companies won't touch you, so we spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on diagnostics and no actual treatment. And so that was I was diagnosed with PCOS and Chad was diagnosed with low testosterone, which equaled a low count. And the two together, we were told we had very small chances of getting pregnant naturally. So we spent the next couple of years trying just to work on our fitness and do things naturally as much as we could. And then finally I spoke to an endocrinologist, who is someone who specializes with hormones in the brain, and actually got me on metformin to deal with my cycle issues with PCOS and the weight issues that kind of make the symptoms worse. So after being on that for about a year, I think 2 years maybe, I have to admit I don't exactly remember the timeline of everything. Chad's much better with that stuff, but pretty much I'd been on it for a little while. We had a unconfirmed pregnancy, but then a fairly confirmed miscarriage after speaking to the doctor afterwards, because they wouldn't let us in. And that was on our own. So we've had 2 natural losses on our own. Fast forward. We decided after being in the States, well, Chad was closer to 10, me it was right on 9 years, it was time to move back to Australia. And as part of that decision, we started looking into IVF. Now, we had thought about it on and off throughout the years, but it just wasn't the right timing. I mean, by the stage we moved here, it was something like close to 10 years of infertility and trying and diagnostics and all the rest of it. And we'd thought about it. It just, one, it wasn't really financially feasible for us. And 2, we just felt like every time we went to go ahead with next steps, either IUI or IVF, we felt God kind of said, no, it's not the right time. Not that it wasn't right for us, but just the timing wasn't right. And so we left it. And so then we moved back to Australia, and I had 3 options for IVF. Private, to go through a government incentive and bulk billing when it started, which was going to be a couple months down the track. There's other vlogs that I've explained that, so I'll leave that alone, but pretty much we decided to go bulk billing. I went to the private doctor first because I knew that he was going to be the director of the bulk billing clinic. So I saw him privately, and he pretty much diagnosed me with endometriosis. I had surgery. I had stage 3 endometriosis that was removed. Luckily, it hadn't got to my fallopian tubes or ovaries yet. And then we went into IVF. So we did 5 rounds of IVF. We're getting ready for round 6. So that's just in brief to recap. Obviously, all the information about the last 5 cycles are on this channel. You are more than welcome to check it out, or if you've got messages, do like my friend did and message me and I will try and answer them. The question my friend asked me was, had we considered adoption? And I know I have talked about this on this channel before, but I thought it might be a good time to kind of recap as we're getting ready to go into round 6. First of all, I want to say I love adoption. I have friends who were adopted children. I have friends who have adopted children. And I just think it's a beautiful process. It's a beautiful, well, maybe not the process, but it's a beautiful outcome. It's a beautiful thing. And obviously there needs to be adoption. There are a couple of reasons why we don't. Some are practical reasons and some are, and I guess the first and foremost is, like any other major life decision or career or whatever, I believe there's a calling to that. And I believe that some people are strongly called to adoption. And it's amazing. Chad and I don't feel called to that. And we've thought about it. And if the opportunity presented itself, it wouldn't be an automatic no. Of course, we would consider it. And honestly, we probably would do it. But the opportunity has never really presented itself to us in a couple of different ways. So it's something that I'm not anti by any means. It's more just we don't feel like it was the right fit for us. And that's got to be everyone else's personal decision and process. And I think sometimes it's easier for people who have been able to get pregnant on their own or have wanted to seek adoption from the get-go or have made that decision to be like, well, why don't you just adopt? I guess first of all, I want to say there's nothing just about adopting. When we were in America, it was extremely expensive and a long process. And so we had friends who knew they were going to adopt this baby boy early on, like a couple months in, and then didn't actually get him until he was like 2. And so the process even before that was a couple of years. So I think in total before they actually got their baby boy, who was 2 by the time they got him, was over 3 years. So first of all, it's not a quick process. Second of all, America, I don't know about here in Australia, but it is about $30,000 in legal fees. And if you ended up adopting outside of the country, you, depending on what country that is, sometimes there are commitments like you adopt the child and then every 5 years you have to take them back to their country of origin so they are continue to have links to their heritage. So it's not necessarily an ongoing cheap thing either if you can't afford to do that. Second of all, if you did foster to adopt, there's nothing just or simple about that either. First and foremost, with fostering, the first priority is to try and re-establish the child with their family. And so if you are taking on children, and this is just my understanding, I'm by no means an expert, I've got much more other friends who are more in the know than I am and have gone through the process. So if you have more questions about that, I might have to connect you with one of them. But my understanding is that even if you are fostering a child with the agency's intention to get them adopted, they still have to have all the family sign away the rights. Like we've had friends who the grandparents stepped in and said, no, actually we want to take care of them, have them for 2 weeks, and then decided no, they didn't. And then, yeah, so that emotionally also, it is just really can be very heartbreaking as well. And I guess for us, if that was more the route we wanted to go, of course we would look at adoption if it was, I guess, part of maybe the progression of a next step. But I would have more of a heart to just foster children that needed a home and a loving base short term before trying to reunite them with their families. And over the last couple of years, it is actually something that Chad and I have looked into a couple of times, and pretty much because we are here in Australia anyway, because we are actively seeking to still biologically have our own children, we are an automatic no. Even though I've got 20 years childcare experience, even though my husband works with Aboriginal communities, and to be honest, the numbers in Australia, I think, are 55 to 60% of foster care children are Aboriginal. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way things are here at the moment. And so even in that situation where on paper we're kind of perfect, because we're still trying to have our own children, we're a no without even more consideration. We did look at doing that in America, but between Chad and I's work schedules, I mean, the last couple of years, it just wasn't feasible because we wanted the stability of having us both at home to be able to do that, and that just never happened. So those options have kind of been put on hold, or aren't even really options for us at the moment. So I guess in short, that's why adoption isn't really for us. But the other thing in Australia is, which has been a bit of a culture shock for me after living in the States for such a long time and coming home, was that it doesn't really happen in Australia, not from within Australia. Adoption still occasionally happens outside from other countries and children are brought in. But because of the history of Australia around the stolen generation that was still happening up until the 70s, there's a real stigma around the idea of adoption and taking children away from their families, which may or may not have been done the right way. I mean, there's lots of evidence that in many, many, many cases it wasn't. And so the other side of that as well is that in Australia we have incredibly good, not perfect, but incredibly good public health care. And so in America, I think a lot of people who choose to adopt out their children are trying to give their children a better life. And in Australia, I'm not saying that there's a better life available than America. It's more to do with there's the support available for people who choose to keep their pregnancies, maybe more so than in America. And so again, there's a bit of this stigma around adopting out children. I think in the agency that I'm volunteering for, it's only been an option once in 30 years. And that person actually went over to Melbourne to give birth to their child and adopt out in Melbourne and then move back, because it was more to do with not wanting to know that they were pregnant. And so there's lots of facets, including cultural reasons why it's not really done here. But for us personally, I guess the biggest thing is just we haven't felt called to that, and we still feel like God gave us a promise about us having our own children. And it's even hard for me to say that out loud because of the amount of loss and difficulty we've had around that. But as we get ready to go into round 6, I really started to build up a bit of that hope and excitement again. And yeah, I guess I'm just getting ready to jump into that. We are sane or not sane, getting ready for this 6th round. We've seen our new doctor. He has told us we are going ahead with a double embryo transfer. We are going to continue with ICSI, which is where they inject the sperm into the egg for fertilization. Based on Chad's results, it was pretty much similar to what it was before, so still a low count and average motility. So we'll be going ahead with that. The round still may look different because the amount that they'll be giving me in the injections the dose will be much lower than it was previously, so it may take a little bit longer, especially than this last round, but hopefully that means my chances for getting OHSS is much less. So I guess that kind of brings us up to where we are now. And look, I just wanted to kind of wrap this up by saying, look, first of all, I appreciate the question. I have opened up my life to do this more openly, and that's part of the reason is awareness and to keep family and friends in touch with where we're up to with our journey. So please, if you have questions, feel free to send them through either on YouTube or on Instagram or anything like that. Feel free to get hold of me. I guess the other thing is that if you are someone who's not had to go through infertility, or even someone who is approaching someone else, can I just say, I know this person and I know that they meant no malice by it. They were genuinely just curious. But if you're asking someone, especially who's maybe newer on this journey, and just has the desire to have their own children, automatically asking someone either why don't they have children, or why haven't they thought of adoption, or have they thought of adoption, can I just say in love that please just think about this before you do it, and maybe have a relationship with that person first. I know culturally it's normal to ask people if they have children because it's such a big part of society, and for so many people it's easy and natural. But for someone going through infertility, sure, ask the question, and if they say no, can I just ask you pause before maybe asking them what for some people may consider the next step is, oh, well, why? Because if you really think about it, there's 3 kind of answers to that question. And if you ask it, 1, they may not want to answer that. They may not feel comfortable with that. 2, it may be just pause and think about if this is really something you actually want to know the answer to. And if you are, ask in love and curiosity, and then listen to them, and maybe try not to advise. Because I can tell you now, someone going through infertility has been advised of all of the things, and I'm sure what you're saying to them is not necessarily new. If they've been going through infertility, I'm sure they've also looked it up themselves. So there's probably lots of advice online too. But I guess those 3 responses are, 1, I'm choosing not to have children. And again, if you think it's appropriate to keep probing, maybe pause and think about that too, because that could be the response of someone who's really had to come to terms with infertility, or legitimately have very thoughtfully chosen not to have children. And in that case, absolutely respect and honor that, because that is a brave choice too, especially in the society in which we live. The second answer would be, we can't, or we haven't been able to have children. Is that really a conversation for the setting that you're asking that, or has that been invited into that conversation dynamic? And I guess really the third response is kind of a combination of like, just haven't yet, whether that's chosen or unchosen. And if you're just a newly married couple, maybe you haven't even explored that yet. And I know it's a natural progression in a conversation for a lot of people, but it's also quite awkward. So depending on what response you actually are looking for, it's not just casual chit chat. So maybe just keep that in mind. And with the adoption question, same thing as I explained earlier. I truly believe adoption is something that people are called to. And if you're just asking, maybe because you have been adopted or there's been adoption in your family already, know that that's your choice and your calling, and it may be not the person you want. It's also very dismissive of the actual genuine desire that is ingrained in most people to have their own children, their own biological children. And so I just want to say again, with love and care, that this is, it's any of those choices, decisions, or the choice being taken out of your hands with infertility, that it's personal, it's not a casual conversation. And I'm sure if you had a genuine desire to know of that person, maybe first of all ask if they're open to having that discussion, and maybe set it for another time so that they've got a chance to prepare their heart for a conversation if they're willing to have that with you. Anyway, I rambled on long enough. Just know that I love you. I am one of you. I'm praying for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.